Sarah Chen walked through the long corridors of the Galactic Council station. Her footsteps echoed in the massive halls built for beings much larger than humans. The walls were made of some crystal that glowed with soft blue light. She had walked these halls for 3 years now as Earth's ambassador, but today felt different. Today the other species looked at her with something new in their eyes, something that made her stomach twist with worry. The council chamber was huge. Thousands of delegates sat in curved rows that rose up like a stadium. The air smelled strange, a mix of different atmospheres that each species needed to breathe. Sarah took her place in the small section marked for Earth. Around her sat the representatives of older, more powerful civilizations. The Zephyrians looked like living crystal statues. They had been part of the council for over 10,000 years. Their bodies caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls when they moved. Next to them sat the Vextai, who looked like giant insects, but shared one mind across their entire species. They never spoke alone, always in perfect unity. The Luminals were the strangest of all. They had no solid bodies, just glowing energy that took roughly humanoid shapes. High Chancellor Kethvar, a Zephyrian whose crystal body was ancient and clouded with age, called the session to order. His voice rang like bells through the chamber. "We gather today to address the human problem," he said. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The human problem. Not the human question or the human situation. Problem. Sarah had been Earth's voice here for 3 years. In that time, she had watched humanity try to earn respect in the galactic community. Humans had shared their music, their art, their literature with dozens of species. They had helped stop 3 small wars through diplomacy. They had traded fairly and honestly. They had followed every rule and regulation the Council had set. But it was never enough. When humans proposed new trade routes, the older species voted them down. When Earth scientists made breakthrough discoveries, the Council dismissed them as primitive insights. When human colonies spread to new worlds, the ancient races spoke of upstart species who didn't know their place. Kethvar continued speaking. "For 50 years we have allowed the humans to participate in galactic civilization. We welcomed them despite their youth and inexperience. We have been patient with their growing pains." Sarah felt her hands clench into fists. Patient? Humans had given everything to prove themselves worthy of respect. They had followed rules that no other species had to follow. They had accepted limits that would have crushed any other civilization's spirit. However, the Chancellor's voice grew harder. Recent human actions have shown they cannot be trusted with the freedoms we have granted them. Images appeared in the air above the chamber. They showed human colonies on worlds in the outer rim. These were planets that no other species wanted. They were too far from the galactic core, too dangerous, too difficult to reach. But humans had gone there anyway. They had built cities on worlds of ice and desert. They had made homes on planets where the gravity would crush most other species. Humans have expanded beyond the borders we set for them, Kethvar announced. They have claimed worlds and sectors we designated as off-limits to young species. Sarah stood up. This was her moment to speak for her people. Honored Chancellor, those worlds were unclaimed. No other species wanted them. The surveys showed them as empty sectors. A sound like breaking glass came from the Zephyrian section. It was their version of laughter. "Empty to us does not mean available to you, human. We left those sectors empty for good reasons." Velthar, the speaker for the Vextai, clicked forward. When the hive mind spoke, it was through dozens of mouths at once, creating an echo that made Sarah's skin crawl. The young species always push too far. They take what is not offered. They reach beyond their station. Sarah felt anger building in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "Earth's expansion has harmed no one. We have not taken any world that belonged to another species. We have not broken any treaties." "You have broken the most important rule of all," Kethvar said. His crystal body flashed brighter. "You have forgotten your place." The chamber fell, silent. Sarah looked around at thousands of alien faces, and in most of them she saw the same expression: disappointment, like adults looking at a child who had misbehaved. "The Council has reached a decision," Kethvar announced. "The human species will immediately cease all expansion. You will surrender the 12 colonies you have established in the Outer Rim. Your population growth will be limited to replacement levels only. Your technology will be monitored and restricted to prevent further overreach." Sarah's heart stopped. They wanted humans to give up their children's future. They wanted Earth to stop growing, stop learning, stop becoming more than what they were. "Furthermore," the Chancellor continued, "humanity will accept permanent junior status in this council. You will have no vote in major decisions. You will have no voice in matters that affect galactic policy. You will be allowed to exist, but only within the boundaries we set for you." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. This wasn't just about the colonies. This was about putting humanity in a cage and throwing away the key. "The human ambassador will now give her species' response to these terms," Kethvar said. "We expect cooperation, as all young species eventually learn to cooperate." Sarah stood up slowly. Around her, thousands of alien eyes watched and waited. They expected her to bow her head and accept. They expected humanity to give up everything they had worked for. They expected humans to choose survival over freedom. Sarah thought about the colonies they wanted her to surrender. New Terra, where families had spent 10 years turning frozen wasteland into farmland. Kepler's Hope, where human engineers had built cities inside the cores of dead volcanoes. Liberty Station, where children born under alien stars learned to call that distant place home. She thought about the restrictions they wanted to place on human children, how many babies Earth would be allowed to have, how many minds humanity would be permitted to produce. She thought about the monitoring of human technology, about aliens watching over human shoulders, deciding what knowledge humans deserve to have. Sarah took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. It carried to every corner of the massive chamber. "No." The single word seemed to hang in the air. Silence stretched for long seconds. Then came the sounds of confusion from thousands of alien throats, crystals chiming in distress, insect voices clicking in agitation, energy beings flickering with shock. "What did you say?" Kethvar's voice had lost its calm tone. Sarah looked directly at him. She looked at all of them. "I said no. Humanity rejects your terms." "This is impossible," Velthar clicked. "No species has ever refused a council ultimatum." "Then I guess we're the first," Sarah said. The chamber erupted. Aliens shouted in a dozen languages. Crystals rang like alarm bells. The luminals blazed brighter with agitation. Kethavar's voice cut through the chaos. "You do not understand what you are saying, human. We offer you a chance to live, to continue existing under our protection. If you refuse, you face the combined might of 1,000 worlds." Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Chancellor, I don't think you understand what you're threatening. You've never seen what humans do when someone tries to put us in chains." The ancient alien's crystal body flashed with anger. "You are one small world against the galaxy. You cannot win." "Maybe not," Sarah said, "but you'll have to kill every last one of us to stop us. And before you do, we'll show you why no one should ever try to cage humanity." She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the council chamber descended into chaos. As the doors closed behind her, Sarah heard Kethvar's voice one last time. "So be it. The humans have chosen extinction." Sarah smiled grimly as she headed for her ship. The aliens had no idea what they had just unleashed. Sarah's ship raced through hyperspace toward Earth. The journey that normally took 3 days felt like 3 years. Every moment that passed meant the Council was moving closer to making their threat real. By the time she reached Earth's solar system, the response had already begun. Admiral Marcus Torres stood in the command center of Luna Base, humanity's main military headquarters built inside Earth's moon. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars from the border wars 20 years ago. His weathered face showed no emotion as he read Sarah's report. but his knuckles were white where he gripped the data pad. "They want us to surrender 12 colonies," he said to the room full of officers. "They want us to stop having children. They want us to give up everything that makes us human." Captain Lisa Rodriguez, commander of the Deep Space Patrol, slammed her fist on the table. "Let them try to take it." "They will try," Torres said quietly. "Intelligence reports show Council fleets already moving toward our space. 300 ships heading for the outer rim, 1,000 more being prepared." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the numbers. Humanity had 67 military ships scattered across a dozen systems. The Council had enough firepower to turn every human world into space dust. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of Human Military Research, spoke up from her chair near the back. She was a small woman with wild hair and eyes that never seemed to rest. "Numbers don't tell the whole story, Admiral." "What do you mean?" Torres asked. Elena stood up and walked to the main display screen. With a few touches, she brought up images of human ships next to Council vessels. The alien ships were massive, covered in weapons and armor. They looked like flying fortresses. Human ships looked like toys beside them. "Look at these designs," Elena said. "The Zephyrian ships are beautiful, but they're built like their bodies. Rigid, crystalline. Hit them in the right place and they shatter. The Vextai ships are coordinated perfectly, but that coordination is also their weakness. Disrupt their hive mind communications and they become confused. The luminal ships are pure energy constructs. Powerful, but energy can be redirected." Torres leaned forward. "You're saying we have a chance?" "I'm saying they've never fought humans before," Elena replied. "They've never fought a species that improvises, that adapts, that refuses to give up." Sarah's voice came through the communication system. She had just arrived and was still on her ship. "Admiral, I need to tell you something about the Council session. When I said no, they didn't just look angry, they looked shocked, confused. No species has ever refused them before. Because no species has ever been as stubborn as humans," Rodriguez said with a grim smile. Torres activated the main communication array. Within minutes, he was speaking to every human military commander in known space, every colony governor, every ship captain. "This is Admiral Torres." His voice carried to dozens of worlds. "By now, you've all heard about the Council's ultimatum. You know what they want us to give up. I'm here to tell you that Earth's government has decided to reject their demands completely. Across human space, people stopped what they were doing to listen. In the ice cities of New Terra, families gathered around communication screens. On the volcanic world of Kepler's Hope, miners put down their tools. In the research stations of the Outer Rim, scientists left their labs. They think we'll surrender because we're outnumbered," Torres continued. "They think we'll give up because we're young. They think we'll bow our heads because every other species has done the same thing." His voice grew harder. "They're wrong. Humans don't surrender. We never have. We never will." The response was immediate. From every human world came the same message. "We stand with Earth." But the Council's response was swift as well. Within hours of Torres's broadcast, trade ships carrying human goods were turned away at alien ports. Human diplomats were expelled from a dozen worlds. The Galactic credit networks froze all human accounts. Sarah, now back on Earth, met with President Zhang in the emergency bunker beneath Geneva. The president was a small woman who had led Earth through 2 economic crises and a solar storm that nearly destroyed the orbital habitats. But she had never faced anything like this. "They're trying to starve us out," President Zhang said, looking at reports of the economic blockade. "No trade, no credits, no access to galactic markets." "It won't work," Sarah replied. "Human colonies are almost completely self-sufficient. We had to be since we were always treated as second-class citizens anyway. On the other side of human space, the first shots were being fired. The Council fleet reached the edge of human territory and demanded that the research station Horizon's Edge surrender immediately. The station's commander, Captain Chen Wei, sent back a simple message. "Come and take it." The Zephyrian ships opened. Fire first. Their crystal weapons sent beams of pure light that could cut through most ship hulls like paper. But Horizon's Edge wasn't most ships. The humans had built it inside a hollowed-out asteroid, with armor made from materials salvaged from dead worlds. Captain Chen had only 12 ships to defend the station, but he used them like a master chess player. The human vessels were faster than the Council ships, more maneuverable. They darted between the massive alien vessels like mosquitoes, striking at weak points and disappearing before the aliens could respond. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over. Horizon's Edge was badly damaged but still operational. 3 Council ships had been destroyed and 5 more were crippled. The aliens retreated to regroup. News of the victory spread through human space like wildfire. If 12 ships could hold off 50, what could humanity accomplish when fully mobilized? Dr. Elena Vasquez worked around the clock in her laboratory. She had teams of scientists studying every piece of alien technology humans had ever encountered. Trade goods, diplomatic gifts, even tourist souvenirs. Everything was being torn apart and analyzed. Each species has evolved differently, she explained to Torres during one of their briefings. The Zephyrians think in harmonic patterns. Their technology resonates. If we can find the right frequency, we can shatter their ships like breaking a wine glass. What about the others? Torres asked. The Vextai share one mind, but that mind has to coordinate billions of bodies across hundreds of worlds. There has to be a central processing point. Find it, disrupt it, and their entire fleet becomes helpless. The luminals are pure energy, but energy follows laws of physics. We just need to figure out how to exploit those laws. Across human space, ordinary people were doing extraordinary things. Farmers were learning to operate missile batteries. Teachers were studying ship designs. Children were being evacuated to the safest worlds while their parents prepared for war. On New Terra, Colony Governor Maria Santos addressed her people in the main square. Ice crystals fell from the gray sky and the wind howled across the frozen landscape. They want this world, she said. They want us to pack up everything we've built and leave. They want us to abandon the homes we carved out of ice and rock. They want us to give up the life we made here. The crowd was quiet, but Santos could see the determination in their faces. These were people who had spent years fighting the cold, the storms, the hostile environment. They weren't about to give up now. Let them come, someone shouted from the crowd. We'll show them what humans can do, Santos smiled. Yes, we will. Back on Earth, Admiral Torres received the final report from his intelligence teams. The Council was mobilizing everything they had. 1,000 ships, 100 worlds, the combined military might of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Torres looked at the numbers one more time, then closed the report. He activated the communication system and spoke to every human in the galaxy. They're coming, he said simply. All of them. They think they can break us with overwhelming force. They think we'll see their numbers and surrender. He paused, looking out at the stars where human families lived and worked and dreamed of the future. They're about to learn what every enemy of humanity has learned throughout our history. We don't break. We don't surrender. And when someone tries to destroy us, we become something they never expected. His voice grew quiet, but every human in the galaxy heard him clearly. We become dangerous. The Council fleet arrived at New Terra like a storm made of metal and fire. 200 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The massive vessels blotted out the stars and cast shadows across the ice world's surface. To any reasonable species, it would have been a moment to surrender. Captain Lisa Rodriguez was not feeling reasonable. She stood on the bridge of the converted mining station that now served as New Terra's orbital defense platform. Through the view screen, she could see the alien fleet spreading out like a net to surround the planet. The ships were beautiful in their own way. The Zephyrian vessels looked like floating cathedrals made of crystal. The Vextai ships moved with perfect coordination, like a school of metal fish. The luminal ships glowed with inner fire. They're requesting our surrender, reported Lieutenant Park from the communication station. Rodriguez smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Put me through to their fleet commander. The main screen flickered and showed a Zephyrian whose crystal body reflected the light of a dozen suns. When he spoke, His voice had the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Fleet Commander Shalveth. You have 30 minutes to evacuate this world before we begin orbital bombardment. This is your only warning." "This is Captain Rodriguez," she replied. "I have a counteroffer. You have 30 minutes to leave our system before we show you what happens when you threaten human families." The alien's crystal face showed confusion. "Captain, we have 200 ships. You have a converted mining platform and a handful of patrol vessels. Be reasonable." Rodriguez looked around her bridge. Her crew was young, mostly volunteers from the colony below. They had never fought a real battle before, but they were human, and they were angry. "Commander, let me explain something about humans," Rodriguez said. "We're not reasonable when someone threatens our children." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "All stations, battle alert. Let's show them how humans fight." The first wave of council ships moved in slowly, confidently. They had fought dozens of wars against other species. Every battle had followed the same pattern. The larger fleet would demonstrate its overwhelming power. The smaller fleet would surrender or be destroyed quickly, clean, efficient, civilized. The humans threw out that rulebook entirely. Rodriguez's ships didn't stay in formation to be destroyed. They scattered like wild animals, each ship moving independently. The patrol vessel Thunder ran straight at a Zephyrian cruiser, firing everything it had. The alien ship turned its weapons to destroy the attacker, but Thunder wasn't trying to win a fair fight. At the last second, the human ship veered away, having drawn the cruiser into range of hidden missile batteries on New Terra's surface. The Zephyrian ship exploded in a shower of crystal fragments that caught the light like deadly stars. The Vextai ships moved to surround the human defenders, but Rodriguez had studied their tactics. The hive mind species fought with perfect coordination because they shared thoughts instantly. But that also meant they all made the same assumptions. The human ship suddenly stopped fighting and began broadcasting on all frequencies. Not words, but sounds. Music. Specifically jazz music with its random rhythms and chaotic improvisation. The Vextai ship slowed as their shared mind tried to process the unpredictable patterns. In that moment of confusion, the humans struck. Not at the ships, but at the communication relays that let the hive mind coordinate. Precision strikes took out antenna arrays and transmission nodes. Suddenly, the perfectly coordinated Vextai fleet was a collection of confused individual ships. The luminal ships were the deadliest, but they were also the most vulnerable to human creativity. Dr. Elena Vasquez had studied their energy-based technology for months. She had discovered that luminal ships generated massive electromagnetic fields to maintain their structure. The humans had prepared a surprise. Hidden in the asteroid belt around New Terra were dozens of mining charges, the same explosives used to break apart rocks for processing. But these had been modified. When they exploded, they didn't create fire or shrapnel. They created electromagnetic pulses. As the luminal ships closed in on the human defenders, Rodriguez gave the signal. Asteroids throughout the system exploded in flashes of invisible energy. The luminal ships flickered like candles in a hurricane as their energy matrices were disrupted. Several ships simply came apart, their energy returning to empty space. The battle for New Terra lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the human defenders were battered and exhausted. They had lost 6 ships and taken heavy damage to their defense station. But the Council fleet was in retreat. 57 alien ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors limped back to Council space, carrying reports that would shock their leaders. The humans fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. On Earth, Admiral Torres watched the battle reports with grim satisfaction. New Terra had held, but it was just the beginning. Intelligence showed Council fleets moving toward a dozen human worlds. The aliens were mobilizing everything they had. "Sir," reported Colonel Hayes from the Intelligence Division. "We're getting reports from across Council space. Human Special Forces teams have been busy." Torres looked at the tactical display showing the galactic map. Red dots marked Council military bases, communication centers, and supply depots. Over the past week, many of those dots had gone dark. The Council species had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what real war looked like. Their military bases were more like museums than fortresses. Their supply lines ran through space that had been peaceful for centuries. Their commanders were politicians as much as soldiers. Humans remembered that war was about more than big ships shooting at each other. Team Delta, led by Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, had infiltrated the Zephyrian supply depot at Kepler Station. The aliens used crystalline storage systems that kept supplies in perfect stasis for centuries. Very efficient, very advanced, very fragile. Santos and her team planted small explosive devices throughout the crystal matrix. When they detonated, the charges didn't just destroy the supplies. They created a resonance cascade that shattered every crystal structure in the facility. Decades of stored military equipment turned to glittering dust in minutes. Team Alpha had a different mission. They hit the Vextai communication hub on Nexus Prime. The hive mind species needed constant communication to coordinate their actions across the galaxy. The hub was heavily defended, but the aliens didn't understand human psychology. The human team didn't try to fight their way in. Instead, they posed as maintenance workers from a species the Vextai had conquered centuries ago. The aliens were so used to being obeyed that they never questioned the work order. Team Alpha walked right into the central communication center and planted a virus in the computer systems. The virus was Dr. Vasquez's creation. It didn't just disrupt communications, it fed false information into the hive mind network. Suddenly, Vextai fleets across the galaxy were receiving contradictory orders. Ships turned back from their missions. Supply convoys went to the wrong destinations. The perfect coordination that made the hive mind strong became a weakness as they fought against their own confusion. The luminal worlds proved the hardest to infiltrate, since they existed partially in energy space. But humans had found a way. Team Gamma used modified stasis pods that let them exist temporarily as energy beings. They penetrated the luminal command center on Brightness Prime and sabotaged the central energy distribution network. When the YOF network failed, it created a feedback loop that disabled every luminal ship within 50 light-years. The energy beings found themselves trapped in emergency backup bodies, unable to maintain their fleet coordination. But the humans paid a price for their victories. Many of the Special Forces teams didn't make it home. They knew the risks when they accepted their missions. They were fighting for their families, their freedom, their right to exist as human beings in a galaxy that wanted to cage them. Back on New Terra, Captain Rodriguez stood in the ruins of her command center and looked out at the ice plains where her people lived. The battle was over, but she could still see the scars where alien weapons had struck the surface. In the distance, construction crews were already working to repair the damage. Her communication officer approached with a message from Admiral Torres. Rodriguez read it twice before the words sank in. Captain, the message read, intelligence reports indicate the Council is mobilizing their entire combined fleet. Over 1,000 ships heading for Earth itself. They intend to end this war with one decisive strike. All human forces are ordered to fall back to Earth's defense. Rodriguez looked around at her crew. These people had just fought impossible odds and won. They had proven that humans could stand against any enemy. But 1,000 ships was more than overwhelming force. It was extinction. Ma'am, Lieutenant Park asked, what are your orders? Rodriguez folded the message and put it in her pocket. Signal all ships, she said. We're going home. As the human ships prepared to leave New Terra, Rodriguez took one last look at the world they were abandoning. The ice cities still glowed with warm light. Children still played in the snow. Families still gathered for dinner in homes carved from frozen stone. Dr. Elena Vasquez had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes were bloodshot and her hands shook from too much caffeine. But she couldn't stop working. In her laboratory deep beneath Luna Base, she and her team were racing against time to level the playing field. Show me the Zephyrian analysis again, she said to her assistant, Dr. Park. The holographic display lit up with the image of a council ship made from living crystal. Beautiful and deadly. But Elena saw only weaknesses. Every perfect facet was a potential point of failure. Their crystal matrix resonates at 17 different frequencies, Dr. Park reported. But there's a harmonic convergence point at 2.7 gigahertz. Elena smiled for the first time in weeks. If we hit that frequency with enough power, the entire ship would shake itself apart, Park finished, like a wine glass breaking when an opera singer hits the right note. Exactly. How fast can we modify our weapons to generate that frequency? The weapon modifications are already complete, Park said. But Elena, there's something else. The captured Vextai communication device has been giving us information about their hive mind network. Elena turned to look at the alien artifact on the lab table. It looked like a metallic brain covered in pulsing lights. The humans had captured it during one of their raids, and it had been broadcasting constantly ever since. What kind of information? Command codes, fleet positions, battle plans. Park's voice was excited. Elena, we're not just listening to their communications. We're plugged directly into their collective consciousness. Elena stared at the device. The implications were staggering. We can see everything they're thinking? Everything their military forces are thinking, yes. And Elena, we can inject thoughts too. Across human space, the retreat was in full swing. Every colony, every outpost, every ship was falling back toward Earth. The Council fleets pursued them, growing bolder as the humans seemed to run. What the aliens didn't realize was that the retreat was a trap. Admiral Torres stood in the command center watching the tactical display. Red dots showed Council fleets converging on Earth from a dozen directions. Blue dots showed human forces falling back, always staying just out of reach of the alien ships. Status report, Torres ordered. All human forces are in position, reported Colonel Hayes. The Council fleet is exactly where we want them. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system. She was commanding the main battle, group falling back from the outer rim. Admiral, the Zephyrian fleet is maintaining pursuit. They think they have us on the run. Perfect, Torres replied. Execute Operation Shatter. Throughout human space, the retreat suddenly became something else entirely. Ships that had been running turned to fight, but they weren't using conventional weapons anymore. The first Zephyrian, ship to die, didn't explode. It simply came apart as every crystal in its structure found the same resonant frequency. The beautiful vessel dissolved into glittering fragments that caught the light like deadly snow. Then another ship resonated itself to destruction. Then another. Within minutes, the proud Zephyrian fleet was a cloud of crystal dust drifting in space. The Vextai hive mind species faced a different kind of attack. As their ships closed in, on human positions, false thoughts began flooding their collective consciousness. Not just false orders, but false emotions. Panic, confusion, fear. The hive mind had never experienced these feelings before. They shared joy and purpose and unity. But now, corrupted signals from the captured communication device were injecting chaos into their perfect mental harmony. Vextai ships began firing on each other as conflicting orders raced through the network. Some ships turned back home. Others stopped moving entirely as their crews struggled with thoughts that weren't their own. The luminal energy beings discovered that humans had learned to speak their language. Dr. Vasquez had cracked the mathematical patterns that controlled luminal technology. Human ships began broadcasting equations that caused luminal vessels to lose cohesion. Ships made of pure energy found themselves trapped in emergency physical forms as their energy matrices were rewritten by human mathematics. The beings of light became beings of confused, fragile matter. But the real shock to the Council came when human technology began outpacing their own. The aliens had spent millennia perfecting their ships and weapons. Their technology was advanced, efficient, and unchanged for thousands of years. It worked, so why improve it? Humans had been studying alien technology for only 3 months. But in that time, they had done something the Council species had forgotten how to do. They had innovated. Human ships began appearing with weapons that shouldn't exist. Energy shields that absorbed attacks and redirected them back at attackers. Missiles that phased through armor and exploded inside enemy ships. Fighters that moved faster than physics should allow because they briefly stepped outside normal spacetime. How is this possible? Demanded Fleet Commander Kethvar as he watched his forces being torn apart by technology that had been impossible just weeks before. His science officer, a crystalline being whose facets were clouded with confusion, struggled to explain. The humans appear to be adapting our technology at an unprecedented rate. They're combining principles from all our civilizations in ways we never considered. That's impossible, Kethavar insisted. It takes centuries to understand the principles behind hyperdrive technology, millennia to master energy manipulation. Sir, the science officer replied quietly, I don't think the humans are trying to understand our technology. I think they're improving it. That was exactly what they were doing. Dr. Vasquez's teams had taken alien technologies apart and put them back together in ways their creators had never imagined. Zephyrian crystals were combined with Vexti neural networks and luminal energy matrices to create hybrid systems that worked better than any pure alien design. But the humans' greatest advantage wasn't their technology, it was their psychology. The Council species had ruled the galaxy for so long that they fought wars like chess matches. Careful, calculated, predictable. They followed established patterns because those patterns had always worked. Humans fought like cornered animals with the minds of chess grandmasters. They were unpredictable because they refused to follow anyone else's rules. Captain Rodriguez found herself commanding a fleet action near Jupiter. 50 human ships against 200 Council vessels. The aliens had numerical superiority and better position. By every rule of space combat, the humans should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, Rodriguez ordered her ships to dive directly into Jupiter's atmosphere. The Council ships followed, confident that they were pursuing a fleeing enemy. But the humans weren't fleeing. They were using Jupiter's massive gravity and magnetic fields as weapons. Human ships, smaller and more maneuverable, skimmed through the giant planet's upper atmosphere while the bulky alien vessels struggled with the gravitational forces. The humans had studied Jupiter's magnetic field patterns for months. They knew exactly where the radiation would be strongest. When the alien ships emerged from the planet's radiation belt, their electronics were fried, and their crews were sick from radiation exposure. The human ships, protected by new shielding based on adapted alien technology, picked off the disabled vessels one by one. News of the victories spread through human space and beyond. Species that had been conquered by the Council centuries ago began to whisper about the small mammals who refused to surrender. Some began to wonder if freedom was possible after all. On the Zephyrian homeworld, citizens watched in shock as their supposedly invincible fleet was torn apart by creatures they had considered barely more than animals. The crystal beings had not experienced military defeat in over 5,000 years. The Vexti hive mind found itself fracturing as human interference corrupted their communications. For the first time in their species' history, individual Vexti began thinking independent thoughts. Some found the experience terrifying. Others found it liberating. The luminal energy beings discovered that their perfect understanding of the universe had blind spots. The humans fought with chaos and creativity that couldn't be calculated or predicted. But the Council's greatest shock came when they realized the humans weren't just defending themselves. They were attacking. Admiral Torres had never intended to fight a defensive war. While Council fleets were being destroyed in human space, human strike forces were hitting targets throughout the galaxy. Not just military targets, but the economic and political infrastructure that held the Council together. Human teams infiltrated the Central Banking Authority on Prime Meridian and crashed the galactic economy by introducing chaos algorithms into the trade systems. Suddenly, species that had been allies for millennia were arguing over money and resources. Other teams hit the Council's communication networks, injecting human music and art into official channels. The aliens found their serious political discussions interrupted by jazz music and human poetry. It seemed like a joke until they realized the cultural contamination was spreading. Young aliens across the galaxy were beginning to question why they should obey leaders who seemed so out of touch. The most devastating strike came when human special forces reached. The Council's capital world of Centrius Prime had stood unconquered for over 10,000 years. Its crystal spires reached toward the stars, and its energy shields had never been breached. The planet was the seat of galactic government, home to the oldest and most powerful beings in the galaxy. Today, human ships darkened its skies, Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as his fleet took position around the ancient world. Below him, the planet's surface glowed with the light of 1 trillion beings from hundreds of species. This was the heart of galactic civilization, and it was about to fall to a species the Council had dismissed as primitive mammals. "Sir," reported Captain Rodriguez from her position commanding the orbital perimeter, "the planet's defense systems are powering down. We're receiving a transmission from the Council chambers." Torres straightened his uniform. After months of brutal warfare, this moment felt almost anticlimactic. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to show the interior of the great Council chamber. The tiers of seats that once held thousands of delegates were now mostly empty. In the center stood the 3 surviving members of the High Council: High Chancellor Kethvar of the Zephyrians, Prime Voice Velthar of the Vextai, and Bright Commander Luxandra of the Luminals. They looked very different from the confident rulers who had delivered humanity's ultimatum just 6 months ago. Kethvar's crystal body was cracked and clouded. Several facets had gone dark. Velthar's hive mind spoke with only a single voice, now the others having been cut off by human interference. Luxandra's energy form flickered weakly, barely maintaining cohesion. "Admiral Torres." Kethvar's voice had lost its musical quality. It sounded like breaking glass. "We wish to discuss terms of surrender." Torres felt a moment of satisfaction, but it was mixed with something else. Sadness, perhaps. These beings had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and now they were broken. But they had brought this upon themselves when they tried to cage humanity. "I'm listening," Torres said simply. "We offer complete withdrawal from human space," Kethvar continued. "Your colonies will be recognized as sovereign territory. Your expansion rights will be restored. We ask only that you allow the Council to continue governing the rest of the galaxy." Torres was quiet for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited for his response. These were good people who had fought impossible odds and won. They deserved to go home to their families. But Torres thought about all the species across the galaxy who were just now learning that their histories had been rewritten, their cultures suppressed, their potential limited by Council policies. He thought about civilizations that had been destroyed for refusing to submit. He thought about the young species who would face the same choice humanity had faced if the old system continued. "No," Torres said finally. The alien leaders looked shocked. "Admiral, surely you don't intend to rule the galaxy yourself." "Not rule," Torres replied. "Free." Sarah Chen's voice came through the communication system from the diplomatic ship that had just arrived in orbit. "If I may, Admiral." Torres nodded, and Sarah's image appeared beside his on the Council's screen. She looked older than she had 6 months ago. The war had aged them all. But there was something new in her eyes. Hope. "Chancellor Kethvar," Sarah said, "the age of the Council is over. But that doesn't mean the age of galactic civilization has to end. We propose something new. A voluntary association of free species. Equal representation regardless of age or size. No species forced to accept limitations on their growth or potential." "Impossible," Velthar clicked. "The young species need guidance. They need structure. Without the Council's wisdom, the galaxy will collapse into chaos." Sarah smiled. "With respect, Prime Voice, the galaxy has been in chaos for millennia. You just called it order because you were the ones in control." Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice joined the conversation from her research ship. "We've analyzed the Council's historical records. Do you know what we found? In the past 1,000 years, galactic technological advancement has slowed to almost nothing. Cultural development has stagnated. Scientific discovery has nearly stopped. Because we achieved perfection." Luxandra's energy form pulsed weakly. "Our civilizations reached the optimal level of development." "No," Elena replied. "Because you stopped allowing innovation. You prevented competition. You suppressed any idea that might challenge your authority. You created a galaxy of sheep and wondered why no one ever had a new thought." Torres looked at the 3 ancient beings on his screen. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they couldn't imagine any other way. The idea of voluntary cooperation, of equals working together, was completely foreign to them. "This is what we're going to do," Torres said. "The old council is dissolved as of today. Any species that wants to participate in galactic civilization can send representatives to a new assembly. Equal votes for everyone. No permanent leadership. No junior species. No species gets to decide another species' fate." "And if we refuse?" Kethvar asked. "Then you're free to go home and govern your own worlds," Sarah replied. "That's all anyone should ever be allowed to do." The conversation was interrupted by alerts from across the human fleet. Ships were approaching from all directions, but they weren't council vessels. These were ships from dozens of species that had been suppressed or ignored by the council for centuries. The Tauri had sent their crystalline vessels from the deep ocean worlds. The gaseous Nephilim arrived in ships that looked like captured storms. The plant-like Verdians came in living ships grown rather than built. Species that Torres had never heard of were emerging from the far reaches of the galaxy. "Admiral," reported Captain Rodriguez, "we're receiving hundreds of communication requests. Species from across the galaxy want to join the new assembly." Torres looked back at the council leaders. It seems the galaxy has already voted. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood at the podium in the new assembly hall on Harmony Station, a space habitat built cooperatively by a dozen species in neutral space. The hall was designed to accommodate beings of all types. Aquatic species had their water-filled chambers. Energy beings had their containment fields. Giants and tiny species all had spaces appropriate to their needs. It was chaotic compared to the old council chamber. Representatives argued loudly in hundreds of languages. There were no permanent seats or hierarchies. Decisions were made by consensus when possible, by majority vote when necessary. It was beautiful. "The assembly recognizes the representative from New Terra," Sarah announced. Captain Rodriguez, now the elected governor of the ice world, stood to address the assembly. "New Terra moves to accept the application of the Zephyrian remnant for membership in the Galactic Assembly." There was some murmuring from the crowd. The Zephyrians had been founding members of the old council. Many species still harbored resentment, but the Zephyrian representative, a young crystal being named Shalaton, stood with dignity. "The Zephyrian, people wish to apologize for the actions of our former government. We offer to share our mathematical insights freely with all species. We ask only for the chance to prove that we can be good neighbors." The vote was close, but it passed. Zephyrians would be accepted as equals in the new galaxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez presented her monthly science report. In the 6 months since the war ended, galactic scientific advancement had accelerated beyond anything seen in centuries. Without the Council's restrictions, species were sharing knowledge freely. Hybrid technologies combining insights from multiple civilizations were revolutionizing everything from medicine to space travel. The Verdian agricultural techniques combined with Tauri mineral processing have increased food production on 17 worlds, Elena reported. The luminal energy manipulation principles integrated with human improvisation methods have led to breakthrough developments in faster-than-light travel. Admiral Torres, now serving as the Assembly's rotating military coordinator, gave his security report. 3 border disputes have been resolved through mediation this month. The hegemony of 6 attempted to raid shipping in the Outer Rim, but withdrew when local defense forces responded. No major conflicts to report. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still conflicts, still species that preferred the old ways of conquest and domination. But they were the minority now. Most of the galaxy had discovered that cooperation was more profitable than oppression. After the formal session ended, Sarah walked to the observation deck where Earth was visible as a blue point of light in the distance. Admiral Torres joined her there, along with Dr. Vasquez and Captain Rodriguez. "Any regrets?" Torres asked. Sarah considered the question. The war had cost thousands of human lives. Entire colonies had been damaged or destroyed. The galaxy was still struggling to adapt to its new freedom. "No," she said finally. "We did what we had to do. Rodriguez pointed toward a section of space where construction lights marked a new project. The Vexti are building their first individual living habitats. Some of them want to experience privacy for the first time in their species' history. Vasquez smiled. The young Zephyrians are incorporating chaos mathematics into their crystal matrices. They're creating art that their elders say is impossible. And the Luminals? Torres asked.